Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, Breast Cancer-Related Chemicals and Products Used by Black Women. I am Dr. Barbara Malkus, Board President for Massachusetts Breast Cancer Coalition, and I'd like to thank you all for joining us today. Massachusetts Breast Cancer Coalition is dedicated to preventing environmental causes of breast cancer through community education, research advocacy, and changes to public policy. I am very pleased to welcome today's speaker, Dr. Elissia Franklin. Dr. Elissia Franklin is a postdoctoral research fellow at Silent Spring Institute, whose work focuses on chemical exposure assessment. She has expertise in mass spectrometric analysis and lipidemics, a subset of metabolomics. I think you're going to have to correct me on my pronunciation there, Dr. Franklin.
Lipidomics and metabolomics.
Thank you so much. Which she is applying to exposomics.
Exposomics.
Exposomics. Never too late to learn some new vocabulary. The study of environmental exposures that an individual experiences in biomonitoring work. She is also involved in epidemiological and community-based research, intervention studies, and exposome evaluation. Dr. Franklin, welcome to the webinar.
Thank you so much, Dr. Malkus. I am so grateful for another opportunity to speak here today. I'm gonna jump right to it. Seeing that I'm speaking at MBCC, I don't feel like it's not apparent to those in the audience how important it is to speak about breast cancer. And so breast cancer is a leading cause of cancer-related death among females globally. And it recently replaced lung cancer as the most commonly diagnosed form of the disease. And breast cancer is now the most common invasive cancer diagnosis worldwide. So in people under age 50, breast cancer in females is 6 times more prevalent than any cancer in males. And in addition, the rates of breast cancer diagnosis is rising. So for females under 50, the highest instances of breast cancer is among Black individuals compared to other groups. Also, Black females are have the highest death rates from breast cancer. So most breast cancer diagnoses, as we know, are not associated with genetics or the things that are passed down from parent to child, but are related to environmental factors, including the chemicals that we're exposed to on a day-to-day basis. And with rising rates of cancer, it is urgent that we identify and reduce exposures that contribute to breast cancer as fast as possible. And this starts with understanding the chemicals that may lead to breast cancer. But as you know, when we're trying to figure out if a chemical causes cancer, we can't just like test it on humans. We can't like take a person and expose them to something like formaldehyde and like see what happens. We have to go through other avenues to do so. And so traditionally, breast cancer carcinogens have been determined through animal studies. And this is because they effectively predict human cancer risk. The way these type of studies work is that animals are exposed to some chemical of interest, whatever you're interested in studying. And if exposure is more likely to result in mammary tumors, then the chemical is characterized as a carcinogen. But one of the challenges of these types of studies is that they require a lot of money. So it can take millions of dollars to get the results of these studies. And it can take years to actually execute these and get the findings for it. So we do understand carcinogens and some of the common characteristics um, that are associated with them, and we can test those in cells. And so we believe that these characteristics should be used to determine if chemicals are associated with breast cancer risk. So, researchers have shown that in many animal and cell experiments that DNA damaging properties is a characteristic that is associated with tumor development. However, there are many different characteristics that are associated with tumors, and one of them is endocrine disruption. So, as it relates to breast cancer specifically, there are three different endocrine activities that are associated with mammary tumors. And the first is related to the estrogen receptor. And so, the estrogen in or around a cell will activate a group of proteins. And these proteins are called the estrogen receptors. And these are important for controlling the downstream behaviors of cells. However, cell experiments have shown that there are some chemicals that can increase um, estrogen receptor activity, similar to the way that estrogen itself would. And so um that is something that is associated with uh, mammary tumors. And the other two pathways I'll represent together essentially, and that is the differences in estrogen and progesterone levels. So scientists know that if you expose a tumor to estrogen, it'll grow, and the same is true for progesterone. So this is the key here as it relates to cell-based experiments. If in the experiment you expose a chemical to a cell and you see an increase in the estrogen levels or the progesterone or both, it is possibly a mammary carcinogen. Compared to chemicals that are not mammary carcinogens, they are more likely to increase hormone activity. So we wanted to identify these chemicals that increased the endocrine receptor activity. We also wanted to look at how we wanted to see like if there were any chemicals that increase concentrations of estrogen and or progesterone, so that we can identify likely breast carcinogens. So my colleague at Silent Spring, Jenny Kay, led our efforts in identifying not only known mammary carcinogens, so those chemicals that when a animal like a rodent is exposed to leads to breast tumors, but also some other chemicals that may be carcinogens. What that list allows us to do is to prioritize chemicals that may likely cause breast cancers. Since there are thousands of chemicals out in the world, as we know, we wanted to know which one should we prioritize. So we've compiled a list of 920 exposures to help us identify those priorities. And essentially, what we've done is use public databases to inform this list. So over 200 of the chemicals in our breast cancer relevant chemicals list are known mammary carcinogens, or chemicals that have been found in animal tests to cause breast tumors. There's also another 700 chemicals that we've identified that interact with the endocrine system. And moreover, more than half of the chemicals have more than one breast cancer related effect, which potentially enhances the effects of those chemicals. And so um, once the list was created, we then determined how many of these chemicals may also be DNA damaging, because those combined effects may also compound the effects of the chemicals. And we did find that most of the memory carcinogen and many of those endocrine disrupting chemicals are also DNA damaging. So now what? We have this list of chemicals. So what do we do with it? Well, there are many things we do intend to do, but one that is probably the quickest application of the list is to determine the prevalence of these chemicals in communities that we've worked with and in products that we've recently evaluated. So we know that these chemicals can enter our bodies in many ways, including through inhalation and dermal absorption. But most interesting to me is that environmental chemicals can pass through the placenta and expose an unborn fetus, which implies that today's exposures can affect health issues in generations to come, and more troubling, lead to future disparities in health. Which is why we must understand our exposures. And of the breast cancer related chemicals that we identified, most of those exposures are in everyday products, including those that are in products that we purchase and bring into our homes. Research has shown that Black women have higher levels of some of these hormone related chemicals in our bodies than other racial ethnic groups. As we have identified, these chemicals are associated with increased risk of diseases. And so we must determine exposure sources that are relevant to Black women. And one way that we at Silent Spring are addressing this is by collaborating on the Taking Stock study, which is led by Dr. Bhavna Shamasunder at Occidental College and Jan Robinson Flint at Black Women for Wellness. And this study documents product use among Black women and Latinas living in South LA, which is an environmental justice neighborhood. And uh, over 90% of South LA residents self-identify as a race other than white, and the area is among the top 25% most disproportionately environmentally burdened in the state. And so, as part of this study, we wanted to understand product use among the community. We also recruited 70 women to learn more about their product use habits. And so Silent Spring went ahead and we developed an app to record product use, including personal care, cosmetics, and household cleaning products, to determine what chemicals participants were being exposed to. And so, just to give you a deeper idea about what this app looks like, it is a tool that keeps an inventory of products and allows for product login. This is powerful because typically in research, scientists will ask participants to recall the products that they've used in the past, or even that they and there are times when they don't collect exactly the brand, even if they so essentially, like, what this app is doing is we are able to get the exact products that our participants are using, and we know that exactly what the ingredients are. So what this is helpful for is in the case of like lotions. Traditionally, you would just ask, do you use lotion? But we know that not all lotions are the same, and they may lead to different exposure. So this app gives us insight into not only detailed information about the products, but also the frequency in which participants are using it. And so we worked with participants to inventory products that they used regularly, including entering images of the ingredients list in the app. So as they used them over the course of a week, they logged them into the app. And then we were able to evaluate the use of products and ingredients that participants use through the products. And so Today, I will be focusing on the products of the 35 Black participants in our study, and we were able to thoroughly evaluate the products participants were using. The 35 Black participants logged over 700 products, and these women used a wide range of products from air fresheners to intimate care products. The most reported products were personal care products, with participants logging about 14 products on average. And so it's worth noting that when I say personal care products, that's things like lotions, toothpaste, and washes, which for the purposes of our study, we did distinguish from like hair products, including shampoos and conditioners. And we also in a separate category accounted for cosmetics and makeups and things like that. And so the participants on average used about 11 products a day from various categories, but we didn't see as much logging of the household products, which could be due to participants not using them during that period of time. But again, like there are a lot of products that are being used, and they're across a wide range of categories that are represented here. But one thing we are not able to get by just like looking at the type of product is some insight into exposures. And we really wanted to understand what chemicals women are exposed to. And so we evaluated the ingredients list of these 700 products logged by the women. So what that looked like was we had this database of images that were taken by the participants, and these images captured the list of ingredients that were logged. And we used some software to pull those ingredients from the image, those ingredients lists from the images, and put them into a database. We then had a list of ingredients of all 700 uh, plus products, and all of our methods let us see the real-time ingredients that women are being exposed to, so that like some cases where a company may change the formula of their product, and so now there are two products circulating through the market, but we know that based on the image that was taken by the participant, which chemicals or which formula of that product the participants are being exposed to. So here is an example of one of the product ingredients lists from one of the products logged by um, one of our participants. And one thing that really stood out to me was the many ways in which fragrance is listed on this product. So you have fragrance perfume, which is, maybe a challenge within itself, because when fragrance is listed on an ingredients list, it doesn't really tell you exactly what chemical is being used. The term fragrance can account for thousands of ingredients or a mixture of ingredients, but it doesn't really give you insight to exactly what someone is exposed to. But in this case, you have, this, blanket fragrance term, but then also there's this list of other like individually listed ingredients or fragrant ingredients, one of which is actually on our, so this last ingredient listed here is actually on our breast cancer related chemicals list. But it just shows you that there is like there may be a bit of challenges with like fragrance transparency if you don't quite know what you're looking for. Some other chemicals that we see that I think are of interest is a formaldehyde releaser. And although formaldehyde is not a mammary carcinogen, it still is a known carcinogen, and it's really toxic. And so, like formaldehyde itself. So we're very interested in that, especially with like formaldehyde being in the being spoken up in news and things like that. And so some other chemicals that stand out to me on this ingredients list are that you have two different types of parabens in one product. And so what this goes back to is this idea of, chemical there being multiple effects that a chemical may have. But if you have um, multiple chemicals with multiple effects, then you're or a chemical with only one effect, but it's multiple in a product, you're compounding the potential harms. Then there's also this BHT, which is on the California Prop 65 list. So yeah, this is an example of how these products ingredients lists can be pretty complex and be they can inform you or give you some insight into what is in your product. But then you have like blanket terms like perfume that don't necessarily give you too much information. But this is just one of the ingredients list, and here it's nearly 30 ingredients that are listed on this one product. We have over 700 products from just this subset of women, the 35 women, Black women, from our study. So we compiled this database of ingredients, and we looked at how many of these products have breast cancer relevant chemicals in them. And we found that most categories from our that we looked at had some products that were logged by participants that had breast cancer relevant chemicals. And so here you can see the percentages of products in each category that contained at least one breast cancer relevant chemical. Air fresheners most often listed these chemicals on the label, followed by cleaning products. And overall, you see this and you're like, oh, 3%, one of them is less than half of a percent. And so you're thinking like, oh, these numbers, these aren't huge numbers, right? However, you have to remember that these are products women are using, and they're using them, potentially on a daily basis, to see how many women are using a product that contained at least one of these chemicals of concern. And we found that these exposures span across most of our participants. All but one of our participants were exposed to a breast cancer relevant chemical. And so these chemicals and I just want to remind you here that these chemicals can be on our on the breast cancer related chemical list for multiple reasons. One of them being that it was found to be a mammary carcinogen. So there were some women who use products that in those animal like that have been there are some women who use products that had chemicals that have been tested and known to be a mammary carcinogen based on animal studies. Just as a reminder that the chemicals can end up on the list for being an endocrine disruptor. So what we wanted to look at is how many of the products contain chemical or were exposed to products that contained a chemical that was endocrine disrupting plus DNA damaging, which again is just because you have those compounding effects from the two different effects. So as you can see, all but 3 of our participants were exposed to a chemical that had those that had those effects. So some of these chemicals though are so there are some chemicals that are though in many products. So we found that some of these chemicals are commonly listed on more than are listed um, on more than one product. So here are some of the most commonly listed chemicals across all of the products logged by our participants. The chemical that we saw that had one of the highest that were on one of the chemicals that was most commonly listed on products is benzyl alcohol, which is endocrine disrupting and DNA damaging. And another one is parabens, which is actually a category of chemicals, and it's also commonly listed on the products. So parabens are endocrine disrupting, and products may contain more than one of them in one, as we may recall in my previous slide where I showed that example of the lotion or the product, and it had two parabens listed on one product. And just to kind of give you an idea of how many of the women are exposed to products with paraben, I share here how most of the women are at least using one of these products. And so, again, another category of chemicals that we are interested in are these formaldehyde releasers, because again they are not a memory carcinogen, but they are unknown. Or I'll say like formaldehyde is not a memory carcinogen, but it is a known carcinogen. And so these products with these chemicals may be releasing formaldehyde in the product as a preservative. And what we see here, that most of uh, the participants are also being exposed to these formaldehyde releaser chemicals, which means that the formaldehyde might be being released into uh, their products. And it's important to understand that not only contain that one product may not only contain one toxic chemical, but there are some products that listed chemicals of concern more often than others. And for the products reported by our participants, there were the ones that had um, the highest average number of breast cancer related chemicals listed. It was the perfumes, colognes, the air fresheners. The one thing that stands out to me about this list of the ones with the most listed BCRCs is that they're the products that oftentimes are listed in fragrance. So you think about your perfumes and the air fresheners, or the scented candles, or the fabric softener sheets, but there's also the hand lotion and sunscreen, which oftentimes uh, include a fragrance ingredient or include fragrance. So again, it's not that there's just one chemical and like one product that is being used only once a day. This is multiple chemicals in multiple products, and multiple products are being used per day. And in some cases, like the lotions and the sunscreens, if you're applying sunscreen as it suggests on the label, typically I've seen sunscreen say to reapply every 2 to 3 hours or something like that. So which I can't necessarily say I do, but that, that's what they tell you to do on the label, is reapply. So there are some products that are intended to be used multiple times a day, and so those are multiple exposures. So um and then also there's this idea that a lot of these products are being left on the body for extended periods of time as well. So um yeah, that that is something that we, is of which we're interested in. And um again, what we studied here were just the products that we asked participants to log, and this still accounts for a bunch of products that people are using. But there are some products that are overlooked, and Silent Spring, we are um, looking and taking the direction of looking at some like hair extensions, because they may be an overlooked exposure for uh, folks who wear them. And so hair extensions may contain chemicals. So when I first joined Silent Spring, or since I've joined Silent Spring, I I really became aware of how pervasive like toxic chemicals can be in our environment, especially when you are unaware that they are actually a problem. So hair extensions is an example of an exposure that really caught my attention because of how, like, just like how the product is so prevalent among the Black community, and it is often installed into the hair and worn like on a daily basis. You may wear it for a day, take it off at the end of the day. But there are some installations of the hair where you'll wear for weeks at a time, or even months at a time. 3 to 4 months you'll have these products on your hair. However, there are some concerning properties that are related to these to these products. And there are different categories of it. And in the case of synthetic hair extensions, that they can contain uh, or be made of vinyl chloride and or acrylonitrile. And so vinyl chloride is a known carcinogen, and acrylonitrile is a probable carcinogen. So pretty nasty stuff. So even what I think is even more interesting is that in a biomonitoring study of hairdressers, those hairdressers in that study who had provided or reported to provide hair extension services had higher levels of the biomarker that is associated with acrylonitrile in their body than those who did not report using or providing that service. And so this suggests that these chemicals may be leaching from the hair, and when folks are being exposed to it. There's also an interesting study that had come out that found that heating hair released vinyl chloride and other like volatile chemicals into the environment, into the surrounding air, upon hair extensions being heated. So heating, typically when you one would heat like a synthetic hair product in the event that one would have braids, and you would burn the ends as a way to kind of seal in the hair. So it's a very common practice of burning the hair, and in that case we there are these chemicals that are being released. But beyond that, extensions may contain chemicals that are added for flame resistant properties or water resistance. And we know that there are some flame retarding chemicals that are endocrine disrupting. And we know that when something is water resistant, that may be associated with fluorinated chemicals. And we know that these types of chemicals are associated with endocrine disruption and other health and some adverse health outcomes. So and also there are some chemicals that are added to this hair for just to make it visually appealing, essentially. However, there is limited knowledge around the chemicals that leach from these products when just wearing them normally. So, without burning it and seeing what is emitted into the air, just seeing like if one was just to wear the hair, are there potentially any chemicals that would leach from the hair just from normal wear. And so seeing that women can wear these hairstyles for months at a time, it's possible that extensions are a chronic exposure to harmful chemicals, some of which may be associated with breast cancer. So we're in the process now of finding out what chemicals are present in these hairs, and we really want to or what chemicals are leaching from this hair. So what we've done is we sent about 40 samples to a lab. The samples were different types of hair extensions. So again, there are different types. There's the synthetic hair, there's also human hair, and then also there is a human hair, synthetic hair blend, and we even sent a silk hair product, which was a set of eyelashes actually. And in the lab, what they did something called non-targeted analysis. And essentially with that type of analysis, we're testing products just to see what pops up without necessarily looking for anything specific. And there's a lot of studies that do like targeted, which means that you're picking out a specific chemical you want to look for. And what we chose to do was say, nope, we just want to kind of discover what new chemicals may be present on the hair. Now, one downside of this method is that you could end up seeing a bunch of chemicals and you have no idea of what they are. You just are simply unsure. But you do get the opportunity to not limit yourself in your exploration. So, um, again, we are still in the process of analyzing these data, but from what we've seen from the lab is that there are detectable levels of thousands of chemicals present in the hair, although we don't quite know, although I won't be sharing these data today. I did do a preliminary cross of the breast cancer related chemical list, and in that it suggests that many of these products contain at least a breast cancer related chemical, and some may even have multiple detected. And so, what are some key takeaways from this talk? So, essentially, what um, we were able to identify over 900 potential breast cancer related chemicals, and these chemicals are being used by Black women. They're listed on the products and found in everyday products. And some of these contain multiple breast cancer. Some of the products contain multiple breast cancer related chemicals. We are Hair extensions are an understudied product of concern, and what we're doing is we'll be analyzing the hair extension results to get a clear understanding of the harmful chemicals that they may contain. And we're also interested in sharing those breast cancer related chemicals that are present on the hair. It is important that we really try to understand other exposure sources to better inform interventions and policies. And so, what we are doing to share this information with women is we're partnering. We partner with. We have an ongoing partnership with social media influencers, and this is work that we do with in partnership with the Resilient Sisterhood Project, which is a nonprofit organization based in Boston, which focuses on educating women of the African diaspora about reproductive health. And uh, with our work, we have shared information about endocrine disrupting chemicals with Black women by working with influencers to create content that is related to endocrine, like that is um, in their own voices, and that we feel like is in a relatable and reliable way. So they're using their typical content creating style to share this important information. So what we believe is because it has that touch of relatability, we're able to reach a wide range of Black women in uh, in a massive way. So we reached over 100,000 accounts, and the with when the women with the influencers, they shared back with us the analytics from their posts, and we were able to track nearly 160,000 engagements that were going on in relations to these posts. And even more telling is that we worked with influencers to share a survey with their audience. So what that looked like was the influencers shared a survey with their audience before they actually posted any content related to this topic of endocrine disruptors. And they shared this survey, they then shared their content, and then shared a follow-up survey. And what we found was that those who took the follow-up survey uh, were were more likely to say that they were going to avoid certain chemicals. Those included PFAS, parabens, and BPAs. Uh, that was some interesting findings, but um, I yeah, so those were some interesting findings from that particular study. So this project is called the Product Options and Women Engaged research project, and you can find out more about our results of that study and keep up with pretty much all our research on the Silent Spring website. So I don't want to leave you all without sharing a few tips so that it's not just like I'm telling you, oh, there's these chemicals everywhere, but maybe some actionable steps. And the one tip is to download the Detox Me app. Silent Springs Detox Me app provides clean lifestyle guide that walks you through simple research-based tips on how to reduce exposure to toxic chemicals where you live, work, and play. It's over 300 research-backed tips, and we also on the app have DIY recipes and to replace commercial products that may contain endocrine disruptors and other toxics. Uh, and also, another suggestion would be to consider avoiding products with parabens, fragrance dyes, and chemical UV filters. As you saw, those are the chemicals that were most often listed on the ingredients list of the products that we've looked at. And then also, you could consider supporting lawmakers that seek to strengthen chemical regulations so that one day we do not have to make individual decisions about what to avoid, but instead these chemicals would just not be in our products. What a day that would be. But with that, I'd like to thank you all for coming and sticking around for this talk. I like to show gratitude to my collaborators on the Taking Stock study. If you're interested in learning more about the Taking Stock study, you can go to takingstock.org. Also, thank you to my colleagues at Silent Spring Institute, especially Jenny Kay, who led the effort to coming up with the breast cancer relevant chemical list. If you'd like to read the paper, I have the information here on the slides. It was published in Environmental Health Perspectives. You can also go to the Silent Spring website where we have all of our research and access it from there. If you want to get in contact with me, please email me with any follow-up questions or comments that we may not be able to get to today. So thank you, Cheryl, and all of NBCC for giving me a platform to share our work.
Thank you so much, Dr. Franklin. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Excellent. This always fascinating to have you here, and always something new to learn regarding your research. So thank you for sharing it with us. I will ask that if anyone has any questions, they may post those in the question drop-down menu on the side panel of their GoToWebinar meeting. We did get not a question, but a comment from one of our participants indicating that today will be the day they stop coloring their hair,
Oh,
that they are a 67-year-old female, and this was a great talk, and I can't wait to share the recording with clinicians.
oh,
So I appreciate that comment from uh, our listener here. So while we wait to see if there's any other questions, I came up with a few
okay.
listening to your fabulous talk. So you talked about the traditional method by which they were able to determine known carcinogenic compounds, right?
Yes.
Which did involve animal testing. We know that there was an incredible movement in personal care product industry to move away from animal testing.
Mhm.
And then you talked about identification of endocrine disruptors, DNA damaging chemicals using more of the petri dish methodology. In the absence of animal testing, are we, as, with this industry, missing something? Are we not identifying new carcinogenic compounds to the same extent, or is it more complicated than that?
Yes, I'm sure as you know that chemicals are being introduced, very regularly. There's always a chemist out there trying to synthesize the new fix for some problem. So I do think with regards to how we may be missing some chemical that is definitely there's definitely evidence of that just because of how many chemicals there are that are constantly being introduced, which is why I mentioned that one of the things that I think is most important is that we have more regulations of these chemicals so that it isn't for the individual to have to figure out what is good or bad, but it would be that those companies who are the ones producing the chemicals are the one who have to run these tests before they even go to market, right? So yes, there are things that we're inevitably going to miss, but what we're hoping that our method of having key characteristics as a way of identifying these potential breast carcinogens is that we can more quickly identify some of those and do it in a way that can save researchers some money and some time.
So before the webinar, we were talking about how hard it is to get people to change their practice. And I love that you shared the Silent Spring Detox Me app. That's a great way to at least become informed about the products we use and to think about change. Donna has asked, could you repeat what are those top five? What are the five things, five chemicals that you want people to walk away from this webinar saying, I got to be aware of these five and really start to work to eliminate them from my personal environment?
Yes, so one is the parabens. So you're gonna see parabens on you'll see parabens listed on the products in many ways. It could be as methylparaben, propylparaben, butylparaben. So that's one. Another one is I would definitely try to your best ability to avoid those fragrance chemicals. Again, just to reiterate, fragrance chemical is it's an umbrella term. It's just like it has really no true meaning, or like it doesn't really give you any idea of what is in the product except it smells good or it has a smell. And so fragrance is another one because fragrance can account for some chemicals such as of like phthalates. Phthalates are usually a fragrance. Solvent. And so there's also the dyes. So try to avoid the dyes in products, and also chemical UV filters. So what that may look like is benzophenone. That would be a chemical UV filter that you're gonna want to try to avoid, because we did see that those were in a fair amount of the products that we were looking at.
Thank you. So you mentioned also about when we're thinking about exposures, that there's many ways that we can be personally exposed, but then as women, right, we have the complexity then of also being the person that would carry our embryo or fetus to term, that provides nutrition for that new baby through our mammary glands. And then you talked about like the role of endocrine disruptors, so it impacting intergenerationally.
Hmm.
So, we're complex systems, women, right? Like human beings in general, women especially, very complex systems. So, could you tell us a little bit more about endocrine progesterone disruption, and really what that impacts could be, particularly for the baby that's born? They've now been born with exposure, right?
Hmm.
What does that mean for the trajectory of their lives and disease prevention?
So I like to be very transparent and letting you know I am no expert in the biology side of it all. I am very much on the chemical side, so I'll preface my response in saying that. But what I can speak to is that there are studies that show that increased levels of progesterone or increased level of estrogen is um, is associated with breast tumors. And so or yeah, and so we know that those levels can be carcinogenic. And another one is with the estrogen receptor activity. So more estrogen receptor activity is associated with increased risk of breast cancer. And yeah, I wish that I could speak more to like the the generational path and the pathways and the mechanisms, but that's far outside of my expertise. But if anyone is interested in finding out more about that, you can reach us at Silent Spring. If you email me, I'll definitely connect you to our one of our one of our experts in that space, because we do have a dynamic team that if you have any questions regarding that, I would definitely be able to connect you with a person to get that answered.
And a really important topic for our, the fact that we now know that breast cancer occurrence is happening more and more in younger and younger women who may still be within their uh, years where there's the potential for having a child and giving birth. I think that though, I know from my own experience back in the day, um, I wanted to have a healthy pregnancy. And so reducing exposure during pregnancy seems to be a very important factor. So thank you for that, Dr. Franklin. I'm very interested in the taking stock study. I thought that the app for product use was a very innovative way to get this data. Um, and it certainly looked at the frequency of individual product use. But I
Mhm.
also know that in the personal care industry, right, we are sold on the idea of layering products, right? You need the serum, you need the eye serum, you need the moisturizer, you need the sunblock. Is there a cumulative effect from using multiple products that are increasing your level of exposure?
Yes, that is something that can happen with products. Like you can even think about like a single product. I showed you that list of ingredients for that one lotion. That was only one product, and it contained that many hazards in it. And so you can imagine that, like if basics of chemistry. You take one chemical, you put it with another one, they interact. So you have these chemicals that are together long periods of time sitting on shelves. They may be yeah, they have some estrogenic effects when actually the human is exposed to them, or the body is exposed to them. But then you combine that with, okay, there are multiple chemicals in one product, you're using multiple products, and then on top of that you're using them multiple times a day, over the course of the lifespan. And so yes, there is evidence that there is some compounding effects just from using uh, a multitude of chemicals at one time. And we really, that's definitely something that is of interest, is how are these chemicals interacting with one another, and in the presence of multiple chemicals, you know how amplified are those estrogenic effects.
And what about potential for interaction?
Yeah, so I as a chemist, I can tell you that, yeah, chemicals can interact with one another and then also have some byproducts, but may not be that, great of products either. So we do know that, we've seen that a company may be trying to make a product and they add these chemicals intentionally, but there may be some contamination or some byproducts that then when a lab actually goes to test it, they're like, hey, we found, for instance, benzene in your product. They're like, well, we didn't put any benzene in our product. Like, well, we found it. And it's just as a, result of either some sort of contamination or as a byproduct of the chemicals being in there, or, something of the sort. So yes, for sure.
So it's hard for people to change, and as we age, we get, we have our favorite products, right? We have our favorites. It's what we use, right? It works for us, right? How, what advice do you have for our listeners in becoming good consumers of products that protect their own individual health outcomes? And what do you want folks to know about the process of changing habits?
Yes. So one word of, or I'm going to say a lot of words, but one thing I'll say you start with is just realizing that this is not going to happen overnight. You just bought that lotion yesterday and you've just looked at the ingredients. You're like, man, I did not realize that my lotion that I just bought yesterday has parabens. Well, the good thing is that, you have a whole life to live. And so I would say, like, just take it one day at a time, one product at a time. I'd say first you just look at what you do have in your uh medicine, cabinet or closet, and you get rid of the things you just don't use. And you try to minimize. I would say, like, first you just look at what don't I use? I don't even use that. Let me get rid of that. And then after you get down to like those essentials, those things that like I need, you can start looking at them one by one. So you might want to start with replacing your your moisturizer, but you're not ready to replace your sunscreen, or you're not ready to replace your favorite mascara, and that's okay. So I just like definitely think you just like take it one product at a time and see if you can find a replacement that may be safer or does not list any chemicals concern on them. But I definitely think it's a journey.
Thank you so much, Dr. Franklin. Always a pleasure to be on a webinar with you because you bring so much great research to our program. On behalf of myself and the MBCC board and Cheryl Osimo, MBCC's executive director, I want to thank you, Dr. Franklin, for this very informative discussion today. And I want to thank all of our many listeners for joining us. For those interested, the recording of this webinar will be made available later today on the MBCC website at mbcc.org. If you would like to further support our mission of preventing environmental causes of breast cancer, please consider making a donation by visiting mbcc.org/donate. I appreciate your consideration. Have a good afternoon.